Well, it is good to be with all of you here this morning. Let me just introduce myself. My name is Nathan Waldock, and let me introduce my family, if they'll stand. My wife, Rachel, and my oldest daughter, Rebecca, and then youngest is Hannah, and then Daniel. And we are missionaries in Cambodia. Thank you. You guys may be seated. Missionaries in Cambodia. However, last time we were here, we were missionaries in India. And some of you may remember that. We were missionaries in India for about 10 years. And then the Lord shut the door to India. We could not return to India, and the Lord redirected us to Cambodia. And before I get into that, let me just introduce our other guest here. One of the things, our primary ministry while we were in India was teaching in a seminary there in India. But we also were able to work with a young adult group. And I remember this young man coming to the young adult group. He came because he just moved to the city, and his cousins were coming to the young adult group, and they brought him along. And he came and he listened very carefully and was just a very sincere guy, and didn't know much about him. And I remember one time I showed a video in the young adult group about some missionaries that went to the Philippines. It was a video put out by New Tribes, which is now Ethnos 360. But this video showed these missionaries going to a remote village, learning the language, and then teaching the people about the Lord. And then almost the whole village came to know the Lord after years and years of working with them. And at the end of the video, I said, everyone's just thinking, that's just a great story, a wonderful story about all those people that came to know the Lord. And I said, now let me ask you a question. You saw there these missionaries from America go to the Philippines. And normally when people think of missionaries, they think of missionaries from America. I said, where are the Indian missionaries? I said, yes, often missionaries are from America, but there are Christians in India, and India should be sending out missionaries too. In fact, India can send missionaries where missionaries from America could never go. Missionaries from India could go to the Middle East, whereas if I tried to go into the Middle East, they'd stop and search my luggage for Bibles. And they would be very, very restrictive of me. But Indians go there all the time for work. And they could do some incredible ministry there in the Middle East. And I said, I want you to stop and think about that. A couple days later, this young man came up to me and said, if I wanted to go as a missionary to the Middle East, what would I have to do? And at the time he was studying in his bachelor's degree and continued working with him. He started working, getting involved in a church there in India, shadowing the pastor, but his dad would not let him go to seminary, his dad and his relatives, and sent him to the States for his master's degree, which he completed in Houston. We've kept in touch over the years, and now more recently he's moved to Jackson. And let me introduce him. Stand up, Nikhil. This is Nikhil here. And Nikhil still has a desire to serve the Lord, and he's been very involved. Thanks, you can be seated. He's been very involved in ministry in the different universities that he's been at, reaching out to international students and things like that. He just recently got engaged to a young girl over in Jackson, Tennessee, and they're both very interested in missions. And we're praying that perhaps the Lord would lead him down that line or in some way, but he's very eager and very zealous to serve the Lord, and we're just thrilled to have him here with us this morning. And he drove all the way from Jackson here this morning. But he's shared his testimony with me before, and apparently it was watching that video and then everything together just kind of brought things together, and that's when you actually came to know the Lord, was right after that, right? Yeah, that's neat. That's neat. So how are we missionaries in Cambodia? How did we get from India to Cambodia? Well, like I said, the Lord closed the door for us to return to India. The government of India is very strongly right-wing Hindu. I mean, militantly Hindu. And they want India for the Hindus. And so they have worked diligently and with great zeal to remove all missionaries from India. And When we were on our last furlough in 2014, we were getting ready to go back to India in 2015, and we applied for a visa, and it never arrived. Finally, after a long, long wait, my wife's visa arrived, but mine never did. Now, that's a very Indian way of doing things, of saying no without saying no. Okay? If I don't have a visa, I can't go. So finally, I asked for my application to be returned, asked for my passport to be returned. I thought, let me try applying for a different type of visa. So when I submitted that application, they said, oh no, you can't apply for another visa because you still have an application in process. So that was a way of locking me from getting a visa. That application is in process, you can't apply for anything else, and that one is being sat on by somebody in the central government, like our federal government. So at that time we realized, okay, looks like the door to India is closed. And we said, Lord, what do you want us to do? Do you want us to just keep waiting? Do you want us to go looking and seeing where you might have us go? And so we talked with our administrators at Baptist Missions, and we got some ideas of some different fields to explore, and we looked at Cambodia, we looked at Myanmar, we looked at Nepal, we looked at Ghana, and we considered Guyana in South America, which has a large Indian population as well. And each one of those just seemed to be a no. No, there's just different reasons why it would not work out. Nepal is actually more closed than India. Myanmar, we could get into Myanmar, but we would have to leave every 70 days. So every 10 weeks, we would have to leave and get a new visa. And the guy that wanted us to go work in Myanmar was a former student of mine who I taught in India. He wanted us to go up to the mountains, another 2-day journey up into the mountains to teach at a Bible college there. And I thought, boy, that's really going to be tough to go in, then 2 days in, spend 70 days there, not even 70 days, 60-something days, and then fly back out and make that trip constantly. They would have to arrange their whole Bible college schedule around my schedule. I said, that's just not going to work. That's not practical. Looked at Ghana, and we said, you know what? That's not where the Lord's leading us. But when we looked at Cambodia, we said, you know what? There's a lot of similarities between Cambodia and India. And we went on a survey trip there. We met some of the missionaries there, and we said, you know what? It could be that the Lord is leading us to Cambodia. And as we searched different things, we realized, okay, every other door was closed. And we said, okay, that seems to be very clear from the Lord. We felt that He was directing us towards Cambodia, and we checked the other options just to make sure those doors were closed. All right, Lord, we're headed to Cambodia. So in June of 2016, we went to Cambodia. We spent 2 years studying the Khmer language. And then we moved out into the province, away from the capital, to help with a local church plant there. It's just a small church plant, and we're going to tell you a little bit about that in our video here in just a second. But we've been there in Cambodia now 3.5 years in Cambodia, and learning Khmer has been tough. We're still learning Khmer. We will be learning Khmer the whole rest of our time there in Cambodia. When you stop and think about it, we're still learning English too. Okay, but yes, the Lord has blessed. We have been able to make some good ground in Khmer. I was preaching in Khmer before we came back to the States, and we've been getting to know the people there in the church. All right. Do you have any questions? Yes.
I happened to notice in the film that anytime anybody was sitting, they had a particular way they set this up there. And I'm just curious if that is some sort of a cultural thing, or if that's the way you become accepted in the community, or what's that all about?
The way they sit down on the floor like this?
Yeah, you do it. I couldn't do it.
Yeah. This is the way you sit. okay? In that culture, to show the bottom of your feet to anybody is a grave insult. It'd be like showing them the middle finger in this culture. It's basically saying that you are beneath me. You are lower than the soles of my feet. And so you don't do that. When you sit on the ground, you sit like this. And our church all sits on the floor. We don't sit in chairs. Cambodians are not used to sitting in chairs except in the capital city. So they usually just sit on the floor. They're very comfortable down there. Yes, it takes some getting used to. And even the Cambodians find it uncomfortable because they'll sit like this, and then they'll switch sides like this. And as men, we have an advantage. We can actually sit cross-legged, like this. Women can't do that. Men can also sit like this. But you'll notice that a lot of people all lean up against the wall as well, or they'll find a pillar to lean up against. But yes, they all sit on the floor, and you keep your feet behind you. You never stretch your feet out in front of you, because that would be an insult. Yeah. I thought I saw a question. Oh, here you go.
What percentage of the people there would you say are Christian?
I don't know if anyone has any clear statistics on that, but it would be less than 1%. It's very, very small. And there's 15 million people in the country, so it's not a large country, but less than 1% is still very, very small, even in that small of a country. Before I forget, we do have our prayer cards on this table out here. Oh, and in the back as well? Okay. And I know that our prayer letters come to the church, but if you'd like to receive them in your email, on the back of the prayer card is my email address. Just shoot us an email and say, hey, I'd like to be on your prayer letter list, and we'll put you on that. Okay. Was there another question?
Actually do.
Okay.
Are there other missionaries in the area, different flavors?
Okay. There are some other, well, in our town, occasionally we see some foreigners, but they're usually with like a humanitarian aid group. Other than that, I don't know of any other different denomination missionaries in our town. There are different denomination churches. There are some very prosperity gospel oriented churches there, and we don't work with them at all. And that was part of the reason why the pastor got really discouraged and angry with God, is he didn't have any fellowship with another pastor, another church, where he could go and say, hey, I'm really struggling with this. He didn't have anyone. And that's been one of our burdens, is to try to get churches planted in the surrounding area that we could fellowship with. Mm-hmm.